Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we will be talking about how to win in beverage occasions through the power of sensory science. Our speakers for today are Susanna Croucher, Senior Research Director at MMR, Aideen McCarthy, Director of Market Research and Consumer Connection at Kerry, and Paul Villas, Beverage Development and Innovation Manager at Kerry. If you have any questions for our panel throughout the webinar, please type them in the Q&A box below and hit the submit button. We will try to answer as many questions as time allows at the end of the webinar. We will also be asking 3 polling questions throughout the webinar and would really appreciate your input. I will now hand over to our first speaker, Aideen McCarthy.
Hello everybody, and we're delighted to be here with you today. To begin, I'll share some context of the study and why we decided to work with MMR in getting a deeper focus into the beverage category. So this slide shows us that really today consumers' lives are very, very different to that of 5 years ago. They're not having any 3 square meals a day, and their lives are complicated and choices are more confusing and very different to what they were. They need help in making the right choices and making the right choices at particular times of day. In order to help to get a deep understanding of the choices that consumers make, we've undertaken a broad study to understand the different needs of different consumers across the different times of day. I'll now hand over to Susanna Croucher, who will take us on a deeper focus into the choices consumers make in the beverage category.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Aideen. So I was delighted to be able to partner with Kerry and their non-alcoholic beverage focus, taking the framework of their consumer first study, but deep diving into the beverage category. So on this slide, just see some of the details of the research that we covered. The beverage deep dive for Kerry was a comprehensive piece of qualitative and quantitative research, covering a week of consumers' lives, capturing all of their non-alcoholic beverage choices. Conducted in the summer of 2018 in the UK, Ireland and Germany, it totaled nearly 29,000 drinks occasions, with consumers choosing from 23 drinks categories and recording their emotional, functional, contextual and sensory feedback in a diary. As I'm sure you can imagine, there's far too much in this piece of research for us to be able to cover in a half-an-hour webinar, so we are focusing on 3 sections. First of those, segmenting the unsegmentables, understanding consumer needs, usage occasions, and how they can be used to win in a complicated and changing landscape. Then we will decode the occasion by using the example of responsible performance, a specific need state identified in Consumer First. We'll decode how needs change throughout the day and how specific products are consumed, and thus identify new opportunities. In our last section, Winning in Fragmented Opportunities, we'll be really honing right in on an opportunity within responsible performance, looking at the opportunity for positive nutrition and focusing on specific strategic beverages within that and how a better delivery can meet consumer needs. So without further ado, we'll move into our first section, segmenting the unsegmentables. You can see on this slide, the average person has 2 macro needs and makes up to 3 different choices within the beverage category throughout the day. However, we know that averages don't tell the whole story. Everyone has a different beverage journey throughout the day, making different choices for different reasons. And here is just a sample of those beverage journeys from some of the consumers that took part in our research. So if we focus in first on Gillian, you can see here that Gillian chooses 6 different beverages throughout the day. Each of those beverages, from her cup of tea in the morning to her oat milk latte, all the way around to her coconut water in the afternoon, are all made for different emotional and functional reasons. Now if we look at David, David is a different example. David is making 5 different choices throughout the day. And again, each of those are for different emotional and functional reasons. However, of course, we can't just look at everybody at an individual level. We need to aggregate this data back up to look for patterns by focusing on the occasion and not the person, we start to be able to segment the unsegmentables. So first, let me explain this graph. Each line on this graph represents one of the macro needs from the Kerry Consumer First. In the diary, our consumers recorded the need they were fulfilling by their beverage choice. By cutting this information by time of day, we can see patterns in the common needs and how they change. So if, for example, looking at the arrow on the top right at the morning, we can see that considered sustenance within beverages peaks at that morning moment and then trails off throughout the day, but does have a smaller peak around the evening time. If we look at the second grey arrow on the right-hand side of the chart, this is indicating enjoyable invigoration within beverages, and that is most likely to be experienced during the middle part of the day, from mid-morning through to afternoon. Within each of these macro needs, we know that consumers are looking to fulfill different desires, both at an emotional and a functional level. Now, for the remainder of this session, we're not going to be able to look at all 6 of our macro needs and all of the different emotional and functional desires consumers have. So we've decided to focus in on responsible performance. You can see here that within responsible performance, there is a real mix of emotional and functional desires, but also some key trends that we're going to touch on throughout the rest of this presentation. The functions of health and energy are really important within responsible performance. The emotional outcomes of energized, confident, and rejuvenated. We'll touch on each of those later. So what have we learned so far in our segmenting the unsegmentable section? Aideen has told us that consumers are different and their lives are complicated, and that this impacts their choices of non-alcoholic beverages. But you can also see that we can segment the unsegmentables when we look at them as occasions and not as people. Future growth will come from targeting specific opportunities of these occasions. So let's explore that further in the next section.
So now we'll have our first polling question. Please select the day part occasion that you think offers the biggest opportunity for growth in beverages. Is it morning, mid-morning, lunchtime, afternoon, or evening?
Thank you, Carol, for that polling question. Now we're going to move on to our second section, decoding the occasion. But before we go straight into beverages, let's learn a little bit more about responsible performance from Kerry Consumer First. I'm going to hand you back over to Aideen, who we heard from the beginning of the presentation.
Thank you, Susanna. So focusing in on the one macro need we identified in our Consumer First tool, that being responsible performance, we wanted to understand how this need drove different choices. So responsible performance makes up 19% of all consumption occasions. And when we're speaking with consumers, what they reflect to us is that they need to feel fit and healthy without harming the environment we're making beverage choices in this need. They want a product that allows them to perform both physically and mentally. And the benefit to consumers is that they want to feel good about the choices that they make for themselves, their family, but also for their planet. The key taste and nutrition requirements consumers are looking for are beverages that are clean, they're authentic, organic, premium, have natural flavours, probiotics, they're good for gut health, and actually free from environs and very good transparent qualities. And now back to Susanna for a deeper dive into this need.
Thank you so much, Aideen. So that was a little introduction to responsible performance from Consumer First. But when we look specifically within non-alcoholic beverages, this is the graph that we showed you earlier. However, now we're just focusing on beverages that were chosen for a responsible performance need. And we can see a peak in the morning, but also an opportunity for growth in the evening, where there is a smaller peak before dipping off towards the night. So here is some top-level statistics about our responsible performance. It makes up 11% of all of our beverage occasions. So that equates, amongst our consumers, about 156,000 occasions throughout a year. From a functional perspective, consumers are looking to wake up, to energy, and to stay healthy. From an emotional perspective, they're looking to be energized, comforted, but also feel a little bit relaxed. This occasion predominantly happens at home when consumers are alone or potentially sharing it with another consumer. You can also see there their top-level beverage choices of water, carbonated soft drinks, and hot coffee. And some of those potentially are not giving them some of the positive nutritional benefits we know that consumers are looking for from responsible performance. If we now look how responsible performance actually changes throughout the day, so those emotional and functional desires that we saw at top level actually change. So in the morning, it is about energy and waking myself up. But as we get through the day, and particularly into that afternoon and evening time, consumers are actually looking for something to help them stay healthy. And they're also moving from wanting that energized emotional outcome through to something that makes them feel more rejuvenated, relaxed, and comforted. And again, we can break down their non-alcoholic beverage choices throughout the day. So the morning time is really about the coffee. And again, as we move throughout the day, we can see this is where carbonated soft drinks come in, and that choice which maybe isn't giving those health benefits that consumers are looking for.
So now we'll have our second polling question. Please select one non-alcoholic beverage category which you think will benefit most from responsible performance. Is it tea, coffee, water, juices and smoothies, dairy beverages, or nutritionally fortified beverages?
Thank you so much for that, Carol. So now we're going to look specifically into responsible performance in the evening. And this shows us a marked difference between what the statistics that we saw at overall responsible performance and actually when that opportunity arises for the evening. It really reinforces why we don't need to just look at the whole need when looking for opportunities, but also focus on the time of day as well as that overall need. So evening represents about 16% of the responsible performance occasions. That equals to about 25,000 occasions a year amongst our consumers. Overall, this really is an at-home occasion, and again, something which consumers are doing alone or perhaps sharing with a partner. And for the majority of the time, they're generally just relaxing whilst enjoying this occasion. And the difference is continued when we look at some of their choices and the reasons for these choices. So consumers are choosing water, carbonated soft drink, perhaps a tea or coffee in the evening. They're doing that to feel relaxed, comforted and rejuvenated. And they're doing it for help them sleep, for great taste, but also to feel healthy. And we can see here some of the sensory aspects of those drinks to really helping deliver that emotional and functional outcomes. The products that are natural, that are thin, that are fruity, smooth, light, and cooling. But how do we know that that's an opportunity? How do we know that responsible performance in the evening is big enough? Well, let's take Fevertree as an example, so from the wider beverage category. And by focusing on a specific target need and occasion and aligning that the emotional and sensory experience, Fevertree created a really big opportunity and one that they have been able to capitalise on. So now I'm going to hand you over to Paul, who's going to talk about how you might be able to capitalise on this with a Kerry solution.
Thank you, Suzanne. Let me introduce you to our first concept, Herb Orchard Citrus. Herb Orchard Citrus is a delicious, refreshing and complex botanical and fruit-based beverage with no added sugar or sweeteners. It is a complex medley containing 22% extracts of the following: green tea, rosebuds, fennel, apples, limes and grapefruit. It is designed to impart cues like those of a premium gin without the added alcohol or calories. To serve, simply pour over ice or blend with your favorite mixer. This ultimately delivers not just great taste with better for you ingredients, but also plays to a comforting emotional space for consumers linking to the light and natural sensorial aspects of the beverage. Herb Orchard Citrus is made with Kerry Simply Nature botanical and citrus extracts. Passing you back to Susanna.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's something I'd definitely like to try. So we can just see here how that beverage might fit into the evening occasion. So what have we learned so far in decoding the occasion? We know now how looking at specific occasions gives a chance to identify target opportunities and how we can decode that target using both the Kerry Consumer First and the Beverage Deep Dive. Hundreds more opportunities exist, and delivering the relevant sensory cues in partnership with Kerry will help you access them. Now moving on to our last section for today, and we're breaking the occasions down further to explore the world of fragmenting opportunity. So, we have already learned from consumers that have different needs and that they change. But what about when we look at specific drinks categories of choice? When, how, and why are consumers choosing them? So let's take the example of drinks with positive nutritional benefits within responsible performance. We can see consumers are more likely to choose these in the morning and again in the afternoon, and they're choosing from a diverse set of beverage categories. But is the sensory delivery of these products really fitting to their desires? Well, first, let's size the opportunity. Market predictions tell us that drinks with positive nutritional benefits are likely to rise by around 18%. So currently, in 2017, 61 million units of beverages with positive nutritional benefits were sold, and that is predicted to rise to 73 million by 2022. And the Beverage Deep Dive tells us why consumers are making these choices. We know they're choosing them from an energy boost, from a functional perspective, and feel energized from an emotional perspective. We also know what beverages they're choosing. We know what they're doing. They're predominantly at home, and they're eating a meal when having a positive nutritional beverage drink under responsible performance. So how can we know how to make a positive nutritional beverage better? Well, let me explain. This is a principal component map that shows all of the consumer sensory terms selected about their choices with positive nutrition. In simple terms, the closer a term is to another, the more likely they will be to be selected together. So you can see there on the bottom right-hand side of the map that savoury flavour and thin sit quite close to each other. That means that those two attributes will most likely be selected together. This alone, however, does not tell us the whole story. So using the principal component analysis, we statistically map their sensory terms that consumers selected versus the time of day their beverage of interest was chosen, as represented by the coloured dots labelled on this map. So now we can cluster terms and look for opportunities. And you can see those clusters on this map as indicated by the coloured circles. So you can see there on the bottom left we have the lunchtime, and that's surrounded by the green circle indicating the sensory term most associated with that occasion. We can see mid-afternoon as indicated on the top left by the red circles, and then we can see evening at the very top of the map in purple, before moving over to the right-hand side of the map where we can see mid-morning in a yellow circle and the morning in a blue circle. Analysis of this key bit of information tells us that within positive nutrition in the morning and evening, the opportunities are well covered. They have a very tight sensory space, as indicated by the closeness of the terms and the size of the bubbles. However, therein lies an opportunity in the occasion spanning from mid-morning through to the afternoon. These sensory spaces are much less well defined, as represented by the bigger circles on the map and the wider distribution of the sensory terms. So I'm going to hand you back over to Paul, who's going to talk to you about how you might target one of these occasions with a Kerry beverage.
Thank you, Susanna. Our second concept is called Go Green Pro. Go Green Pro is a delicious and refreshing drink. It is an energizing beverage designed for positive and sustained morning energy boost. It is high in protein, containing beverage infused with guarana and ginseng extracts. Within the beverage matrix, there is a complex of energizing B vitamins and a relative level of natural caffeine. This ultimately delivers not just great taste with better for you ingredients, but also plays to the energizing emotional space for consumers, linking to the light and natural sensorial aspects of this beverage. Go Green Pro is made from the following Kerry technologies: Kerry Simply Nature Botanical Extracts of ginseng and guarana, Kerry Taste Sense Plus for flavor modulation, masking, and most importantly, sugar reduction, and Kerry Pro DM Refresh Protein. Passing you back once again to Susanna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. That is certainly a beverage that I would like to try. So, what have we learned so far about fragmenting opportunities? We've learned that traditional beverages don't offer the only opportunity, and that by targeting drinks like those with positive nutrition, you can better match the consumer needs at those specific moments in time that we have identified throughout this presentation. And also, we've learned how you can align the sensory profile to fill the gap and fuel this opportunity. So growth will come from delivering the perfect product that perfectly matches that fragmented opportunity. And now I'll hand you back to Carol one last time for a polling question.
Thank you, Susanna. For our third and final polling question, how important are sensory attributes in the new product development process for beverages? Are they very important, important, not currently considered, unimportant, or very unimportant?
And finally, as we come to a close for this webinar, what we hope to have achieved is that we have demonstrated through this research a better understanding that every consumer has a different and fragmented beverage journey, and they make different choices depending on their need and occasion as a result. New growth opportunities can therefore be found by correctly decoding daypart occasions and understanding both the sensory, emotional and nutritional needs of consumers. In the future, winning in these occasions is brought to life by using insight to inform beverage innovation and creating beverages consumers will want to buy, drink and most of all enjoy.
Thank you, Aideen, Paul and Susanna for a really interesting discussion. With that, we'll move to the questions and answers portion of today's webinar. Just to remind everyone, please feel free to type any questions that you have into the Q&A box below. Our speakers would love to hear from you and answer any queries you may have. We will begin by looking at the polling question results.
Very good, everyone. Thank you very much for the webinar. As we said earlier, please feel free to type any questions you have into the Q&A box below. And now we'll begin looking at the polling results. So the first question we had was, please select the daypart occasion you think offers the biggest opportunity for growth in beverages. 30% of you selected morning, 23% mid-morning, 7% lunchtime, 32% afternoon, and 8% evening. So very much reflective of some strong opportunities in terms of the earlier mid-morning part of the day, and then also in terms of the afternoon opportunity as well. So certainly across day parts, good opportunity growth is being represented there as well. We'll now shortly move to our next polling question, which was, please select one non-alcoholic beverage category which you think will benefit most from responsible performance. 6% of respondents said tea, 14% said coffee, 9% said water, 16% said juices and smoothies, 3% said dairy beverages, and a very large 52% talked about nutritionally optimized beverages. Certainly reflective of the growth that is seen across the marketplace in terms of nutritional optimization for beverages, and very much reflected in the research study that was covered from the webinar. So very much on trend at the moment. We'll now move to our third and final polling results. How important are sensory attributes in the NPD or new product development process for beverages? 77% said very important, 21% said important, and just 1% said very unimportant. Again, when we add the two together, 99% of respondents voted that sensory attributes are very important or important to the NPD process. And again, what we found in that research that you've just listened to is this is a key part in terms of winning in occasions for consumers and identifying new profitable growth opportunities. So that is the end of the polling questions. And then what we'll move to now is the questions that have come in the course of the webinar. So we've had some really interesting questions come into us. And what we are getting is our speakers, Aideen, Paul and Susanna, to help us with answering the questions. So without further ado, I'll move to the first question that's come in. So the first question, you mentioned some trends by time of day. Do you see any differences by day of week forward? So maybe, Susanna, if I could pass that to you, please.
Of course. Thank you so much, John. Well, actually, the day of the week was the first way that we cut the data during the analysis, as we had a hypothesis that different parts of the week would affect the needs consumers were looking to fulfill. However, what we actually saw was there weren't really any large differences between early in the week, midweek, and the weekend across the majority of the overarching needs, except the obvious, which would be social pleasure occasions, which were more applicable at the weekend. What we saw was that actually what impacts consumers' need that they're looking to fulfill most, in combination with the functional and emotional equities, was actually the time of day, which is how we have then really delved further into the analysis. Thank you, John.
Very good. Thank you very much, Susanna. And the next question we've got in are, what are the benefits of targeting the need or occasion rather than the demographics? So I'm going to pass over to Aideen to answer this.
Thank you, John. Well, what we understand is that the old rules of targeting and engaging consumers on one level, that be by demographic, no longer apply. Consumers are multidimensional. They have many needs, and these needs change across the day. And what we wanted to do was to micro-target these needs in these particular occasions and to move out ourselves of just thinking about demographics when we were innovating products.
Thank you very much, Aideen. The next question, and again, thank you very much for everyone who has submitted their questions to us. Is there a way I can identify which are the most important needs for my brand to go after? If I can pass that question over to Susanna, please.
Thank you so much, John. Yes, absolutely. So we did capture brands that consumers were choosing within the diary. Obviously, that data is quite fragmented, as there are an awful lot of drink brands out in the category. However, we would be able to look at cutting the data for brand versus need. We would also be able to look at the different equities that consumers are looking to fulfill for a specific need, and look at aligning those with the equities that they associate with your brand as well. Thank you, John.
Very good, Susanna. Thank you very much. And another question that we've had in, and again, thank you very much for all the questions. In responsible performance with morning occasions, how can I compete with hot coffee if I'm a fruit-based beverage? So how can I compete with hot coffee if I'm a fruit-based beverage? Maybe if I could ask Susanna to answer that again, please.
Of course, no problem. So obviously what you've seen in the webinar is that coffee is the most commonly chosen beverage for responsible performance in the morning. But there are lots of other beverages being chosen. So they are indicating that consumers don't just, I'm sure we're all aware, drink coffee at that time in the morning. So for a fruit-based beverage that was targeting this opportunity, I would say the focus should be on aligning the sensory attributes of your fruit-based beverage. So that be the flavours, the aromas, the textures, the afterfeel, for example, to those different emotional and functional desires that consumers have within responsible performance at the morning. So that is data that we have captured and analysed within the Beverage deep dive. So I'm sure Kerry would be able to share that with you. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Susanna. So the next question. Do you have the same information on different needs similar to responsible performance, and how can I access that? So I think we'll pass over to Aideen for this.
Through our Consumer First study, we uncovered 6 macro needs. So for the purposes of this webinar, we focused on one need, which was responsible performance, yet we can do the same across the other 5 remaining macro needs.
Aideen, that's great. Thank you very much. Again, great questions from everyone out there. Thank you very much. So, next question. I don't work in positive nutrition or beverages. Is it possible to identify the sensory attributes that matter most for different drinks categories, so drinks categories outside of positive nutrition? Susanna, could I ask you to answer that, please?
Yes, of course, no problem. The very simple answer is yes, absolutely. So within the research, we captured 23 different individual drinks categories. So, for example, a carbonated soft drink, flavoured water, etc. So we can look at each of those drinks categories individually, or we could aggregate those drinks categories into groups. So that's what we did with positive nutrition. We took of the 23 individual drinks categories, those categories that were drinks with a positive nutritional benefit, we grouped them together into a slightly larger beverage category rather than being too individually specific. And then each of those either 23 individual drinks categories or a more aggregated group can be mapped against the sensory attributes that consumers stated in the similar way that we showed in the webinar today. Thank you, John.
Very good. Thank you, Susanna. So the next question, do you have plans to cover additional countries outside the EU? So I'm going to pass over to Aideen here.
Thank you, John. So our Consumer First study was based on European countries, Spain, Poland, France, Germany and Italy. We're expanding that into 3 other markets in 2019 in Europe, and that will be in the UK, in Russia and also in Sweden. For the purposes of the deep dive into beverages, we went and performed some more qualitative and quantitative study in the UK and Germany, and those are expansion plans for 2019.
We've had some multiple questions in around people accessing the presentation and the slides for you, and I'll cover that point at the end in terms of how people will be able to get access to the webinar for you. So we have another question that's come in. Excuse me. Do you think the use of stevia as a sweetener has an added value in consumers' eyes? So I'd like to pass over to Paul Willis for this, please.
I think actually the consumers had their eyes firmly wide open actually recently. We find really stevia is used across Europe in day-to-day development briefs. We've seen many successful launches, especially in the last couple of years, across many different beverage types and categories. So juice, sports, water and energy are just a few. We've seen it being picked up with nectars and juice drinks and carbonates as well in general. I think the consumer is far more knowledgeable to the naturalness of stevia, and more importantly, I think, actually to sugar content and calorie contents in general. And this is not just where we have countries where there is an active sugar tax, like in the UK and Ireland. I think it's pan-European now. Everybody is concerned about just how much sugar they are consuming, and it is widely now considered, especially with celebrity chefs, the Jamie Olivers of this world, that sugar truly is like a new tobacco. It's a new drug. It's been around forever, and it's still very legal, but the determination to reduce the amount of sugar that we actually consume in our diets, not just in soft drinks, but across the food industry, is only going to continue. And with naturalness being top and foremost in our eyes, really, as developers, we're continuing to use stevia, and stevia producers are continuing to make cleaner versions of stevia, and companies like ourselves are continuing to work with the technologies of masking those negative downsides that stevia in its early days had. So it's I think the consumer, most definitely, their eyes are opened, and it's going to be very difficult to close them. Thank you.
Paul, thank you very much for that very insightful and comprehensive answer. So moving towards just the end of the questions, and we have one here saying, do you believe the selling message of the product should be more about the need it meets, for example, such in terms of sleep, rather than the ingredients themselves? So is it more about the need? And I'll pass over Aideen for this one.
That's a great question, and absolutely, I think in order to communicate effectively with the consumer, we need to really share with them what the benefits of the product meets. And in particular, for responsible performance, what we found was that there was a wide gap in the market open to develop far more nutritional products that actually helped consumers sleep. And that occasion, it goes without saying, is the evening time. Outside of this study, we're also seeing it happening with confectionery, where chocolate is being developed and targeted to help consumers address that afternoon slump. So absolutely, needs and benefits go hand in hand as long as they are relevant to consumer at a particular time of the day and in the mindset that they are.
Aideen, thank you very much. Well, I'm afraid that looks like we're almost out of time for today's webinar. All that's left for me to do is to thank everybody who joined the webinar, who listened to our three speakers, Aideen, Paul and Susanna, and listened to the slides. If we didn't get around to answer your question, we'll send you an answer by email. Please note you will be able to also receive an email with a link to the video recording of today's webinar, and you can contact us excuse me, at any time for more details for the issues that are raised. The insights and opportunities to help you in beverage occasions through the power of sensory science. And then finally, again, just like to thank our three speakers and to thank everyone for being with us today on the webinar. The webinar is now closed. Thank you and goodbye.